In Plainfield, Wisconsin, two women unfortunately went missing and were to never be seen again. Mary Hogan and Bernice Worden are the two victims of this perpetrator. Mary Hogan went missing from the tavern she managed in Pine Grove, Wisconsin, whereas Bernice Worden went missing from the hardware store that she managed in Plainfield, Wisconsin. There was only a short distance between where Mary Hogan and Bernice Worden went missing. Mary Hogan and Bernice Worden were both working when they were first discovered missing. This perpetrator did not leave the bodies where they were first abducted and killed. The bodies were moved directly after the crime had been committed. At the initial crime scenes, the perpetrator possessed some type of anger and hate towards the victims. Both victims were shot in point-blank range with a .22 caliber rifle. No evidence pointed to any sexual behavior at the original crime scene. It seems as if the victims knew their offender, so the victims might have been more comfortable and trustworthy of their offenders, which allowed the perpetrator to easily manipulate their victims. Traces of evidence were left behind at the first scene of disappearance. Blood splatter and stains were found at both initial crime scenes. Also, a receipt for antifreeze was found at the scene where Bernice Worden was shot. A few miles away, the bodies were finally deposited at an unkept farmhouse. The body of Bernice Worden was found hanging like a game animal from her legs, and her body was sliced open and mutilated. Along with Worden's body, many other bodies were found inside this house, along with many different types of artifacts. The evidence that was found at the crime scene were 4 noses, whole human bone and fragments, 9 masks of human skulls, 10 female heads with the top sawed off, human skin covering several chair seats, Mary Hogan's head in a paper bag, Bernice Worden's head in a burlap sack, 9 vulvas in a shoebox, skulls on the bedpost, organs in the refrigerator, a pair of lips on a drawstring for a window shade, a belt made from human nipples, and a lampshade made from a human's face. Based on the information available, the perpetrator is a male in his late 40s to early 50s. He is well educated but has a very skeptical work history. Possibly could say that he jumped from job to job because the perpetrator was never satisfied with what they were doing. The evidence available gives clues to conclude that their family life growing up was not the greatest. A skeptical relationship with a mother or father is given in clues from the crime scenes. The characteristics that are described do fit with the typical serial killer. The perpetrator was a very non-social person who kept to themselves and did not stray too far from what they know. Additional elements that are present in this perpetrator's crime scenes are dismemberment, souvenirs, and trophies. This additional information that these elements give about the perpetrator could possibly mean that the offender might be eating their victims as well. The offender's house, car, or any property that they own will also more than likely have a souvenir or a trophy of the kill. This perpetrator is geographically stable. All of the murders, along with the other crime scenes, happened near Plainfield, Wisconsin. The perpetrator did not travel outside of their comfort zones in order to commit the crimes. The offender did not become adept at their crimes, which leads to believe that this is why the perpetrator's comfort zone did not expand. Since the perpetrator had a very small comfort zone, it says that they could be a disorganized offender. Disorganized offenders are more likely to have smaller comfort zones, and their crime scenes are closer together like this offender's crimes were. The perpetrator only spaced out his crimes a little bit, which could point to a fear of getting caught or the offender being very disorganized with their crimes. This killer is an asocial person, which means that it is not common for them to pick up conversations with people or leave their house very often. They more than likely have little to no friends or family that they associate with. This perpetrator would be a hedonistic serial killer. From the second crime scene that was discovered at the unkept farmhouse, it showed that the perpetrator would cut and play with organs of their victims in order to have sexual intercourse with them. That would also make the perpetrator a lust killer. In order to be a lust killer, there are certain characteristics that an offender has to fall under. This perpetrator fell under most of the characteristics, which were overkill, evidence of torture, the body was moved, a specific victim, aberrant sex, weapon of torture, strangling of the victims, penile penetration, object penetration, and necrophilia. A little while after the body of Bernice Worden was found, Edward Gein was the murderer of Bernice Worden and Mary Hogan. Ed Gein was a white male who resided in Plainfield, Wisconsin. Gein was very devoted to his mother before she passed, which led him to never dating women or leaving his home. Gein would rarely leave his home, and if he did, it was for a very short period of time. At first, Ed Gein was a grave robber. He first began to exhume recently interred bodies from their graves, specifically women. The killing of Mary Hogan was due to her close resemblance of his mother. Ed Gein was specifically focused on women in his murders because during his childhood he was very close to his mother and was taught to believe that all women were sinful and evil. Gein did not travel outside of his comfort zone to commit his crimes. He kept his crimes to the area that he was familiar with, never straying too far from his home. He was also a very non-social man. He would not pick up conversations with people. He kept completely to himself. Ed Gein was later convicted of 2 counts of murder, which sentenced him to life in prison without possibility of parole. Ed spent 10 years before his trial at the Central State Hospital for the Criminally Insane, which is now known as the Dodge Correctional Institute, and then he served at a maximum security facility in Waupun during his trial, and later than the Mendota State Hospital in Madison, Wisconsin, to serve the rest of his sentence.